Welcome to Wisdom from the Aerial View, the podcast for those who wish to learn about how to crush their anxiety and find meaning and purpose in their lives. Good morning, good afternoon. Mark, how are you today?
I'm great, Enid, and how are you?
I'm very good.
You look good.
Thank you. I wanted to do something different today. I'm going to tell you a story. I have been reading, actually an audiobook, which I don't usually do, but this is interesting. It's the Barbra Streisand book, and it's almost 1,000 pages. And I wanted to hear her actually read it because she's one of my favorite people in the world. And, I sing just like her. And would that I did. But the book is fascinating. I've always been fascinated by her. And she, of course, is famous for all sorts of things. And I couldn't wait to read about The Way We Were, about filming that, because I was in love with Robert Redford. And she was talking a lot about the song The Way We Were. And we all know that song, Memories, like the corners of my mind. And I kept thinking about memories. And I thought, let's talk about memories today. And I read a piece, and I told you a little bit about this, so I'm not surprising you too much. But I wrote a piece, I think it was the Washington Post. It must have been. And it was called What Alzheimer's Hasn't Taken from My Father. It was written by a man named Orly Peter, who's a neuro and clinical psychologist. I'd like to read a little bit to you and then talk a little bit about memories, because I have a lot of great memories with you. He writes, at 96, my father is one of the last living Holocaust survivors. He also has Alzheimer's. The disease has not brought him the forgetting that would be a gift to him. Alzheimer's progresses in a pattern that erodes the mind in reverse, stripping away recent memories first, then advancing into the regions that regulate emotion and suppress fear. Early memories, especially those charged with deep emotion, tend to last the longest. So now, with his brain's defenses weakened, the horrors he experienced as a child in a Jewish ghetto in Poland surge through him unfiltered. They come without warning, intruding, even in moments of joy, as if he's reliving them. My father was 11 when the Nazis invaded Poland, and he had to start wearing a yellow Star of David on the front and back of his clothing so that it could be seen in both directions. He and about 200,000 Jews in Łódź were eventually sealed off behind walls and barbed wire. In the ghetto, my father and his family faced starvation and disease and were forced into labor. My father worked in a shoe factory that supplied the German military. Dozens of his family members were tortured and killed. When I was with him recently in Israel, a friend of his was visiting with her 2 sons. My father chatted with them, asking about their classes, and then his eyes grew distant. He suddenly began to speak of his cousins Mirka and Chushkash. His voice was cracking. He was flung back to 1942, grieving for his cousins who, the last time he saw them, were the same age as his friend's son. My father seemed to be back in the ghetto. This was the suffering he'd once learned to contain. He couldn't remember what was going on today, but he was back in the ghetto. This particular piece had a lot of meaning to me. It took place in a place called Łódź, Poland, which is actually where my mother's family came from. But the point of this is memories and what they do for us and what they do to us. So I thought, let's talk a little bit about memories and how do we escape the bad ones? Do we escape the bad? What do we do about memories?
Okay, well,
it's a tough one.
Since I wasn't prepared for this, can we go back to Barbra Streisand and The Way We Were for a minute?
Yes.
Okay. So I went to Union College in Schenectady, New York, and The Way We Were was
That's
filmed.
That's where it was filmed. I know, it was filmed
at Union College. And I remember when they were on set there and seeing them all, and everybody was very excited to see Barbra Streisand. It's interesting you were listening to her book that's 1,000 pages. Wow, that's a long book.
I have nothing else to do in my life. I'm just sitting
there.
Yeah,
well, you could have a root canal instead, because for me, that would probably be better than listening to 1,000 pages of Barbra Streisand, but that's okay. All right, back to the serious topic. The reason I joke around is because it was either that or I was going to cry over that story. It's so tough. Sad. Yeah. To have to live it once and then to relive it.
Yeah.
These memory diseases, Alzheimer's and all the dementias they're just on one level, obviously very terrifying and sad for family members to watch, but they're also fascinating.
Right.
Right. They're fascinating to me because what in the world is going on? What is it about the way our brains work that creates memories, that compartmentalizes memories? Different memories are in different places of the brain. They're not all stuffed in a shoebox in one place in your brain. They're in different areas. The short-term memories in different places, and long-term memory. It's really very fascinating. And when I think about this, on the one hand, if you just look at it from the street view point of view, then you're going to be upset. You're going to be upset, A, that it could happen to you, B, that it's happening to your family member or friends. And certainly this traumatic story you just told, I did see the article. I actually didn't read it until you just read that portion to me. But to have to be stuck back in memories, it's almost like you're in a nightmare and you can't get out of it.
Right.
You know, many of us have nightmares. I'll tell you a story about my nightmares. So I don't have them often, but when I do, usually something terrible's happening to me. Somebody's chasing me. Something bad's happening. And in the really bad ones, I tend to vocalize. And so my wife Deneen will reach over and, shake me or grab my hand or something. And what happens is fascinating. I can see myself being pulled across a divide from the dream back to reality. It's a very visceral feeling of being literally pulled across a threshold. I feel that, right? And so it made me think about what dreams are. I know we didn't want to talk about dreams today, but that wasn't the plan. But I think dreams have something, and memories are very interrelated. I think there are very similar processes that go on. Nobody really understands dreams. In one of my books, my fiction book, Franklin Rock, I wrote a chapter where Franklin Rock, the protagonist, goes back in time and meets Carl Jung, who is the master of dreams, obviously, and they have a fascinating conversation. So it was so real that I had to remind myself that I actually wrote this, that this wasn't a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I know I'm conflating different things, but why we have memories, why we have dreams, these are very interesting questions. We know we have them, but when you stop and go, well, why? Why do human beings have this? Well, animals have them too. We've all seen a dog. Most of us have seen a dog dream, right? And they whimper often. They move their paws. Right?
Yes, indeed.
So the fact that all these animals have these things, it makes you think, well, why? Why do we have? What's the purpose of these things? Why do they exist? And even memories. If you stop and think, well, sure, we remember things, but why do we remember things? Well, one, you could say, well, it's good to remember that a tiger can eat you. So the next time you see a tiger, you go, maybe I should run the other way or avoid it, certainly. So there are, obviously, or seem to be evolutionary reasons for us to have memories. I don't know what the evolutionary reasons are. We should have dreams, but, I don't know what to make of all this sometimes, but I do know that, or what I do think about is looking at these from a different perspective, from the aerial view.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation. Good.
So, we talked about last time Viktor Frankl, or a few episodes ago, we talked about Viktor Frankl and his tenet that we all have control of how we feel. Of course, we don't have control of how we feel when we're dreaming, and we don't have control over our memories. So in this regard, this 96-year-old Holocaust survivor, we can't really apply the Viktor Frankl rule, meaning he gets to control how he feels, because in this case, he doesn't seem to have that control, right? He doesn't have that ability. And that's what I was thinking about when you described this, that, wow, the one power that Viktor Frankl says can never be taken from us
has been
evidently can be taken from us when we have, this dementia. I think I'm very fascinated, as I said, about dementia in general, Alzheimer's and other dementias in general, because I'm not sure what's going on. So on the one hand, let's take this to a broader topic, because I think it's very interesting. We talk about mission and purpose and why we're here, and we're implying, and when we imply that there's something, or I've more than implied, I've stated that I believe there's something after, which implies something that is ascientific, meaning a soul or something else. I say ascientific because we can't prove it one way or the other. It can't be you can make the case that there's a soul if you want, but we certainly have no evidence that there is. There's no scientific evidence there is. It doesn't mean we don't have one. It just means it's ascientific. It's out of the realm of science. We can't discuss it from a scientific realm. It's just opinion at that point. So if we do believe there's a purpose and there's a point, and there's something that follows after, then it has implications for the way our brains work, meaning that we can then look at our brains as an existing off-the-shelf mechanical unit that stores information, that processes information, that stores memories, and then delivers memories back to us. But it's like a machine. It's like a computer. It's something that's not man-made, but could be man-made, meaning it has functionality, but until you load it with software, it doesn't really, at least the cerebral part of it can't really do much, which is why when you're an infant, you don't remember anything. You have no control over these things. And so the base part of the brain, the medulla and the other portions that are the older portions of the brain, evolutionary, those things are just, making our heart beat and making us sweat and keeping our temperature right and telling us when we're hungry. They're doing the very fundamentals. But what we're talking about are higher level functions, thinking, memory, dreaming, right? These are at a higher level. And so when people say, well, there's no evidence for a soul or something outside our brains, when we talk about purpose and mission, we're implying that there is. And of course, any science would say, well, that's nice, but there's zero evidence of that. There's no evidence that this is true. And I would say there's no evidence that it's not true. It's ascientific. We're out of the realm of science. Okay, so why am I talking about all this with memories? So when our brains stop functioning properly, like a car stops functioning properly, or your washing machine or your dishwasher, if you look at the brain the same way, you can say, okay, when it starts losing its functionality for whatever disease reason there is, abnormal protein buildup or amyloidosis, which is another protein, whatever's causing our brain to screw up and not work properly, whatever our soul is, whatever we are, whatever that ascientific part of us, if we believe it, is, I don't think science can say, you see, that proves that there's no such thing as a soul. It only says to me that whatever we want to believe is for a soul or an not extraterrestrial, but extra biologic thing we're talking about, it uses the brain as its tool, right? The brain is its tool. Well, if the brain goes bad, the soul might be sitting there going, okay, now what, right? Yeah. How do I communicate? This machine I've been using for the last 96 years isn't working anymore. So I look at this, and when I look at this from the aerial view perspective, I look at the brain as an object, as a machine. And when it goes bad, it doesn't tell us anything about the rest, whether there is a soul, or the rest of that, whatever that makes us human, that part that makes us, that makes you Enid and me Mark, right? So, and I think what happens, is the soul trapped? Is this whatever we want to, I'm just using the word soul because I can't think of anything better at the moment, but it could still be there, but trapped. There's a syndrome in medicine called locked-in syndrome. It's a neurologic type of stroke where the brain is working fine. You can think, but you can't speak, you can't move. If you're lucky, you can blink your eyes. And so you might have a perfectly intact cerebrum, who's doing simultaneous linear equations in your head, but you can't communicate to anybody. So somebody looking at you would say, oh, he's out of it. He's a vegetable. But you're actually not a vegetable. You just can't get it out in any way. That's just called locked-in syndrome. It's a real syndrome.
But how does somebody know that they have that? If they're not communicating at all, how do you know the brain is still functioning like that?
It's pretty tricky, right? I don't remember all my neuroscience on this, so I unfortunately, I'd have to take a time out and look at ChatGPT, but since we're not going to do that. But anyway, this thing really exists. Yeah. And I think about it the same way where when people have dementia, right? Doesn't mean that their inner person isn't there. It just can't be expressed through the brain. You see the analogy I'm drawing here?
I do.
So we look at somebody with dementia and go, oh boy, they're out of it. They don't know what's going on. They don't know, stuck, leaving out the very sad part you talked about, of being trapped in these memories of, 90 years ago or 80 years ago. But on a more general level, supposing that who we are is still there, but can't express his or herself because the brain isn't working properly. So we call it dementia. It doesn't mean to me that there's nothing in there. It means to me that there could be, it just can't be expressed because the machine isn't working. The brain isn't functioning. The dishwasher has a bad board. It doesn't work. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, but oftentimes the folks who have dementia or suffering from some form of dementia are living in that past. Today, they don't know what they had for lunch, but they remember maybe when they were a child what they used to love, spaghetti and meatballs. It's fascinating to me.
Right. But so what I'm saying, when we look at these people, we treat them as at this very seriously afflicted individual who is trapped in old memories, like this gentleman, or can't remember what they had for breakfast. Yeah. And all these things are true, right? But there's another level that we may not be able to appreciate, just like the locked-in syndrome patients who their brains are working great, but they just can't express it in any way. Like I said, they're lucky if they can blink their eyes. So I find all this fascinating. Getting to the bottom of this, I don't know what dementia is. I don't think we understand it well enough to know what this means for the entire human condition. Is there something else that can't express itself because the brain is not functional like it used to be? Is there more that we're not appreciating? Again, ascientific, can't prove it, don't have any way to prove it. But I find it fascinating. So when I look at people with dementia, I look at them a little differently. Like you, I know, have a tremendous amount of compassion, and most normal people have compassion for these people. But I take it to even another level for me personally. Like, I wish I could get inside, kind of push through the obvious dementia to see what's behind it. What else is still there that is not being expressed by this living organism that may have a soul, that may have something else? These are fundamental questions that if we're sitting with a scientist, if we're sitting with a legitimate scientist would say, I hear you. I'm not saying you're wrong because I can't prove it either way. It's just out of the realm of science as it exists today. So it leaves us with something else, another level, an aerial view level of perspective to see that maybe more is going on than we can appreciate it.
Well, that doesn't mean that. I'll tell you a story. I have a dear friend who's going through it now. She's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I was sitting with her just the other day, and we were having a conversation. And I knew she wasn't tracking at all. There was just no way. But I was going on and on. I was doing the usual Enid. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, I'm in the street view and she's in the aerial view. She was looking at something in a totally different way. She might have been listening to what I was saying. She might have even understood what I was saying. But she was somewhere else. And I was kvetching and she was happy. So maybe she was in the aerial view and I was in the street view. And I thought to myself, I got to get where she is. I don't want to have Alzheimer's, but in many respects, she's happy.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, we paint it with a broad brush. We paint dementias with a broad brush, no matter whether it's from Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or Lewy body dementias. There's a whole bunch of them. We paint them with a broad brush that these people, they just lost their connection to the world, right? To a certain degree, to the real world. And I always wonder, what's going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And I have nothing else to say about it, unfortunately. Yeah. I think I've exhausted my, my opinion on this because it is just opinion, and I just don't know. But, when you're somebody like me who spends a lot of time in the aerial view and looking at the world differently, and I'll tell you, we're going to get off this topic in a minute because I'll tell you why. But, I'm always looking behind the curtain, behind, what is Oz? When you peel the curtain back, what really is going on? So here's another story. Maybe a little, not along the exact same lines, but it kind of filters in what we were talking about. Just getting back to how we react to our situations in our lives, and I think a lot of people relate to this. So I had a phone call very, very recently from a friend I know, who was going through his own medical thing, but he's also a doctor and he's still seeing patients. So he had listened to our episode on Viktor Frankl and, and he's also heard me say so many times that when something happens to me after the initial shock, I generally start to laugh. And he sent me an image, a radiologic image of a woman in her 50s who had just a couple of days of confusion. And he sent me the CT scan anonymously. There's no names on it. But clearly this woman on the CT scan, it was an MRI, CT, I can't remember, MRI, CT, had a brain tumor, pretty big brain tumor. So this was not going to end well. And he said to me, and he texted me and he said, so what would you have her do? Would you have her laugh and smile about this? And I said, what would you have her do? He said, I'd have her hug her husband. I said, that's great. I agree with that. Hug your husband and then laugh and smile. And the reason is because she's not going to change the outcome. The outcome is written. But she could decide how she wants to feel about it. So she could go into a deep depression, stay in her bedroom, not want to see any of her friends or family, just be sad and crying and just full of just morose. Or she could choose to make light of it, right? Like Benjamin Hall did of his injuries. So we talked about Benjamin Hall before. So again, even when these terrible things happen, whether it be dementia that we talked about earlier, memory loss, neither the family nor the patient needs to go into a funk. It doesn't change the outcome. Why be sad? As much as you can control it, choose happy, choose laughing, choose smiling. It sounds crazy. Like my friend said to me, are you nuts? This woman just has a brain tumor and you want her to laugh about it? And I don't want her to laugh about it in the first 5 minutes, obviously. But I do want her to understand that she has control of the rest of her life of how she feels. I don't know how long she's going to be around. She's got a pretty good sized brain tumor. I'm going to get 18 months, maybe, if she's lucky, something like that. So how do you want to spend those 18 months? Yeah, hug your husband, hug your kids, hug your friends, hug your grandchildren if you have them, whatever. Hug whoever you want. It's great. I agree. And tell some jokes with them and laugh with them and do silly things and say funny things because that last record that is already there. It already exists. People think I'm callous, that I don't care. And it's exactly the opposite. I care tremendously. So I want them to, whatever time they have left on this earth, to enjoy as much as they can. Being sad and depressed and unhappy is not the solution, right? I get it. It's a serious situation. Even worse when it's a child, God forbid, right? I've seen so much of this in my life as in medicine. It's devastating. Here's another one. Here's another example of this. So as you know, I did a lot of women's imaging. I did a lot of mammography, breast cancer imaging, probably read 30,000, 40,000 mammograms, probably saw thousands of breast cancers. I can't tell you how many thousands. And the ones that just really slugged me were like a woman who was we see this a lot, a woman who has just delivered a baby and is diagnosed with breast cancer. All those hormones have a lot to do with it. And you think, oh my God, most of them actually do okay nowadays, but still. But I've had plenty in years past who had diagnosed with breast cancer in young women with young children. Of course, the first thought I had was, those poor children, they're going to grow up without a mother, right? I always thought that. And I can't tell you how many times I was on the verge of tears telling women like this that they had breast cancer. It's a lot easier telling a woman who's 80 that she has breast cancer, even though it's not easy, but it's a lot easier, right? For me, certainly. But when you tell a young woman in her 20s or 30s that she has breast cancer and that she has young children, especially, even without children, but certainly even worse with children, it's like devastating to me. And I know it's devastating to her. And I always worried about the children. And then 20 years later, I have a patient and it's one of these children, right? And it's like, they're fine. They're having a life. They have a career, maybe they have a significant other, maybe even they have their own children, whatever. And I think, wow, I have to keep that in mind, that life goes on. Life goes on. So even when there's what appears to be tragedy, we are not trapped in tragedy, right? First of all, things work out one way or the other. Maybe not always well, but they always work out one way or the other. And there's no gain in wallowing in despair. And so when these people have these terrible diseases or dementia, it's just the Viktor Frankl rule still applies. You have control of how you feel. Why would you want to be sad? Spend your time making the most of your life, doing as much as you can to fulfill your mission, enjoying your friends and family. It's just such a strong message that I think is so important to keep in mind when your parent gets dementia, or a friend gets dementia, or somebody gets a debilitating or even terminal disease. This is the way life is. It's supposed to go this way. It's the way humanity is supposed to evolve. This is supposed to happen, but you have control. It's like the ultimate message. It's like God is saying to you, okay, I'm going to give you Job, here's what's going to happen to you. Wait do you see? I'm taking, you're going to be sitting in a broiling sun in full heat. I'm taking away your tree. I'm not going to give you any food or water, right? What are you going to do with it? And Job's job is to say, okay, I get this is my lot, but I don't have to be sad. I don't have to be depressed. I don't have to be angry. I don't have to rage, right? It's such a powerful message for all of us as we deal with our own illnesses and those of our friends and family. We have so much control.
But I would go back and tell you that to me, we wrote a story here about bad memories, there's no question. But there are good memories too. And to my mind, that's another thing to think about. While there are bad things that are happening, you take the woman who you then looked after her child, maybe it was a girl who came in. But what she has are good memories of her mother. So I think memories are important. I think that I never like to discard them. I think they're really important. In fact, it's what brought me back to you. I had memories of when we were kids, and then we came back together at our reunion. And at the reunion, everything clicked in my head about all the memories of what we used to do and now what we're doing. One more thing I was just thinking about, you have these dreams at night and you get up and you don't remember what they were. You forget your dreams. I wonder why that is. We just had them, but then we forget them. Why is that?
I actually remember them for a fair amount of time, more than some people. Yeah, I actually remember some of my dreams. I just want to get back to one thing about memories. Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating since we're talking about, because you were saying memories give you such joy, memories of your past. And here's some of that again, we've talked about, most people don't know, most people don't believe, but it's true. We're going to go back to the jukebox of time just for a minute. Remember, all those memories are not just memories. All those events are still occurring. To me, it is the ultimate comfort food, right? It's like, wow, all those moments, like you talked about your mother and we knew each other's parents and we look back at those times and we have memories of them, memories of our parents and memories of our childhood, but they still are occurring. It is the coolest thing in the world for me to think that those things are still happening. They're just as real as our conversation right now. Every moment is now. There's no such thing as a past. It's past to us, but it's always now where it is, and it's always alive, and it's always happening. In forever, in perpetuity, those moments never go away. How comforting. And to me, that alone is such a great clue as to what is going on in human life, or any life, right? In lives that have consciousness, what is going on, right? The fact that all these moments exist forever, such a powerful clue, right? It just reinforces my concept that I'm stuck on. And again, I don't try and sell things to anybody, but the way time works, the way that all those moments exist is, again, it's a super clue that says, okay, you are here for a limited amount of time. Those moments will go on forever. What are you going to make of them? You have a purpose. Do something. Do good. Take care of others. Leave a legacy. The old story, leave the world better than you found it. Yes. Right. What's going to be, what can you leave at the end when when those days of dementia are gone and you leave this earth? What have you left behind? You've left behind your accomplishments, especially how you've treated others, what impact you've had on the world. So don't be sad. Don't be depressed when bad things happen. Get over the initial shock. Everybody else has an initial shock, and then understand it's part of your story. It doesn't change the mission. It doesn't change your ability to control how you feel, unless, unfortunately, like this gentleman you read about, you have terrible dementia that sticks you into a terrible place. For most of it, that's not the case. So make the most of it. Keep a smile on your face. Be positive. Be happy. It's okay to smile and laugh in the face of adversity or even illness or worse. It's possible. That's what Viktor Frankl told us. You're in complete control. That's what the jukebox of time tells us. You're here for a reason. Make the most of it, and certainly don't spend any more time than you need to in sadness or despair.
And I'll end on this, because when you think about back to the story, the man is still very much alive at the age of 96. And maybe that's one of the purposes that he had. His son still visits him in Israel. There's got to be a reason why he's still alive. It's unfortunate that he's still having those horrible recollections of what happened to him, but he's still alive. There must be a purpose. There must be a reason why he's still alive.
And we don't know what's happening behind the curtain.
And we don't know. On that note, we will end. I thank you. This is a heavy conversation. It has to be. These are kinds of conversations that have to take place. We have to think about these things. I think the biggest issue that I had today is that you don't like Barbra Streisand. So I'm done with you.
You know what? I used to love Barbra Streisand.
You didn't used to. She's the greatest.
No, I shouldn't. Okay. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I wish Barbra Streisand all the best. I think she's got a fantastic voice.
Yes, she does.
And I love seeing her on campus those many years ago.
She's, to me, the greatest. And she said, what's too painful to remember? We simply choose to forget. I thank you. This is great. Appreciate it. Until next time, keep those cards and letters coming in. And we will see you next week. Any final words, Zach?
Nope. Thanks a million for another interesting conversation. I hope our listeners got something out of this one. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Peace.